By that point in the trip, as much as it was beautiful fishing, there was really only one thing on my mind. This was all leading up. This was all a crescendo to Haga. It was the only place that I could think about. It was the whole reason, really, for me returning to Sweden. I was hoping it wasn't going to disappoint me, because I remember I'd only been there for 16 hours or something. People don't realise that we rocked up at dusk and we left at lunchtime. You know, there wasn't much time to enjoy it, and that was what I was really looking forward to, was actually immersing myself in Haga.
Sverige till mig är en utmärkt fint land. Naturligt, inte så många personer, jättemycket fiskevatten. För en fiskare det är typ ett drömvärld. Så att jag känner mig väldigt lycklig att bo här i Sverige. I just said that Sweden's a super country, beautiful, not very many people, but lots of lakes, lots of fishing, and for a fisherman, it's like a dream world.
One of the crazy things about Sweden is that you have all this water and indeed loads and loads of carp, but very few carp anglers. So that's something which really stands out when you go over there, that you're not fighting the crowds. Sweden's a rich and untapped resource for carp fishing, for proper wild carp fishing, for carp with no names, and even lakes which haven't perhaps ever been fished before, which is something that's quite rare really where we come from. Final destination of the trip, the one the boys have been looking forward to, because I've been talking it up. I've been waiting to come back here for, I can't even remember, 5, 6, 7 years. Yeah, Haga. Haga, baby!
Close up.
You can tell the roads got worse and worse and worse and worse, and now we're driving down the graveliest of gravel tracks. Just following my nose, I'm pretty sure we're going the right way. 6 years, 7 years? I can't even remember when we came over here. Eurobank's 4, so yeah, 7 years. Wow, where does the time go? Where does the time go, brothers? Just about to drive up on it. Mooching up and down. Like they haven't got a care in the world. I guess they haven't. Turning up, and it wasn't a struggle to find the fish. They were doing warm weather things, you know, they were chilling, they were basking, and I just remember setting up a rod and just trying to stalk one. It really felt like man against fish. There was nothing else, there were no other distractions. It was purely me versus them. Trying to be like so quiet. I just remember us talking whispers. It felt like you couldn't even talk in a normal voice. It was so quiet. Every footstep was considered. It was important to blend in. I wanted those carp to stay happy. When we first went to Sweden, Gary was our fixer, so to speak. Being an expat who married a Swedish girl.
Swinglish.
Swinglish.
That's what they call you when you're both. Yeah.
Living in Sweden, he was the ideal person. Very well known and respected in the Swedish carp scene. He's a rod builder by trade.
Design rods, build rods. You guys use the guides and the seats on Nash's rods, and that's kind of where I got the connection with Nash. Also sort of before that, knowing Oli and Alan and stuff like that, and they want to come over and fish, of course.
He's got his ear to the ground in terms of local knowledge, so he's the ideal person to lead us through our Swedish journey. We had 4 venues lined up, and they were sort of representative of the different type of fishing that we were going to experience on this trip. The club lake, it wasn't sort of quintessentially Swedish, but it was a beautiful lake in its own way. Perhaps it was the setting. It was kind of in this farm, wasn't it, with pine forests around the outside, and it was so peaceful. There were no roads anywhere near it, were there? Big roads, so yeah, it wasn't kind of like a wild Swedish lake, but it was charming in its own way.
Yeah, the one off the bush, like when do you know what, one bow waved off it when I walked down there earlier, when you both followed me down. I stopped and had a look, because something had made a ripple. And it's that same sort of area.
That's one thing from my travels, is you learn that all carp are the same, really. Wherever you go, they eat the same bait, they kind of behave in the same manner. Well, it's subject to sort of kind of environmental conditions, but carp are carp are carp are carp. So it's easy to get sucked into overcomplicating it. So I stuck to my normal simple tactics: bushwhacker, fishing in the edge, multi-rigs that work all over Europe, bait that I'm confident in, and just enjoy the fishing rather than get hung up on the detail. I had plenty of time in my world to go about and catch a carp or two. So it was relaxing, it felt chilled. I think all of us needed to unwind, and that first couple of days was definitely just an exhalation of breath.
Peace.
I think it was a combination of things. We were all looking forward to the trip, weren't we? We were all looking forward to that kind of Swedish atmosphere, and there is an atmosphere to it. It was beautiful, it was peaceful, and that morning it was so atmospheric. There was a light mist and the sun eventually broke through it, and it was a really beautiful place. It did feel like Sweden then, didn't it? The first fish, I remember playing it, and it was chugging up and down in front of me, and you have no idea what it's going to be, you know, but the whole trip, Brad and I, it was all of our dream to go there. I think it kind of hinged around this idea of the classic dark scaly Swedish mirror. Anyway, what popped up in front of me was not a classic Swedish mirror. It was a lovely carp, but it was a golden, plump, beautiful, perfect thing with a little cluster of scales on it.
Yeah, I like him.
I remember being super gassed that I'd caught one. You know, and that kind of basic fishing for bubblers fishing was going to work. You know, sometimes, even though you know that it's a tactic that works everywhere, you just need reminding that carp are the same all over Europe.
So far, each of them have been lovely in their own way. All different, all individual. That's why we love carp.
The beauty of the fishing in this lake was actually the variety of the stock. We didn't really know what was in there, so each one was a surprise. Common that was like a grass carp that was so long, and I had another one that was beautiful, bristling fish. One with some crazy kind of fingerprint patterns on its skin, and then a really cool big fat one. When you hold one like that in your arms and you're like, yeah, that's a good fish, yeah. It's important, that variety in my fishing. Sometimes you know you're going to catch a scaly one, but scaly ones are all different, aren't they, by default? So, I don't know, there's something magical about not knowing what's going to pop up in front of you. I like that, I like the unknown. Like a lot of places in Sweden, it was a bit of a mystery, the stock. There was definitely some old ones in there, and allegedly some really scaly ones. So it was what we were looking for, you know, to fulfil Brad's dream, and indeed my dream, because who doesn't love dark scaly ones, for sure. It was very cool setting, kind of semi-urban, with a church and a load of houses around it. It was regularly walked by people, but it wasn't your kind of rough and ready council estate park lake. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite.
What we saw was here. Dropped in, catapulted a few monster shrimps and a few tigers out. Kept it really simple, baited around these pads here. You know, it looks like a really likely spot, doesn't it? But you know, even though it was 24 hours ago, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I put too much bait in. But no, it's good to see him sheeting up there. That fills me with confidence. I'm just going to keep it really simple, chuck a couple of rigs at them. If I get a drop, I'm fishing. Sit back, chill out and enjoy. Look at this lake, man.
I'm quite aware these days that you only get one opportunity. I can't go back and do it again. So if I don't pick the camera up and take that shot, it'll be gone, the moment's gone. I come from the point of view of being a cameraman and photographer, and that part is still strong in me. That urge is still strong to create, even when I know that the lads that I'm with are more than capable of capturing beautiful stuff. I just want to do it for myself. It's important, it's part of who I am and what I do.
Faster shutter speed.
The problem for me now is that I don't want 5 average images. I want the one shot, and for me there's always one image that stands above the others. It's choosing your moments carefully and considering the shots. I mean, in the world that we live in at the moment, we're just inundated with images constantly, and I want something that makes me stop and really like look, you know. So yeah, for me it's about looking for that one image that sums up the perfect view. We turned up and there were fish feeding, and I considered using the pole, but actually in that situation I figured it was just going to be quicker and easier just to cast across, and I did actually want to feel the bottom again because I'd baited up a likely looking area. I hadn't chucked a lead about, I had no idea what the bottom was like, so yeah, it took me a few casts to find an area that was firm enough to present on, and I put a little bit of bait out, but I went to bed confident. We all went to bed confident, didn't we? And indeed, it was, I think it was about midnight that I had to take, and I was ready for it. I knew that I was going to have to jump into the waders. I played it right up to underneath my feet, and then I was just about to slip the net under it and reached round, went to net it, and it was gone. Yeah.
I thought I had it, I was just about to slip the net underneath it, and it weren't there anymore, and my fucking rig was there in the lily pad.
No.
Right there, right until the end, mate. Right until I dragged the net and it was gone.
I hate losing carp, but there's always pressure when it might be the only bite that you get. Those bites are not a given. They're not a given. None of these lakes that we fish were easy. There might have only been 2 carp in there for all we knew, so yeah, to lose one and to actually have seen it, it was right in front of me as well. Like I couldn't believe that I didn't have it. You don't know that you're going to get many other opportunities. I felt I'd let the lads down a little bit because I had their expectation as well. They were living their fishing dream through me, you know, so yeah. So we were all disappointed. It's a team effort.
Maybe I was kind of lucky at the other lake. I didn't lose a single one of those. This one, yeah, it was just right at the last minute of the fight. That was a frustrating bit, you know, if you lose it in the pads when you're giving it some, but it was there. Felt like it was one already. Imagining the pictures, the slow lift and that. Bad, isn't it?
It felt intrusive I wanted to intrude as little as possible. I wanted to be part of the landscape. I think we all did, didn't we? So we settled way back from the lake in this little glade and lit a fire that didn't go out while we were there, did it? We kept it burning.
Allemansrätt, translation, every man's right. Basically, it means that you have the right in Sweden to wander, to travel, and to camp.
In Sweden, from a very early age, you're taught to respect the environment. You know, as soon as they can walk, people seem to respect the environment a lot more than perhaps than we do in the UK.
It'll either make us feel great or it'll kill us, won't it?
Well, it would do nothing and taste horrible.
It's one of the few places in the world where you can experience that kind of freedom. Yeah, it felt good to be able to camp where we wanted, really. I know the lads kind of settled into the hunter-gatherer lifestyle of foraging a little bit of wood for the fire and some berries and mushrooms, and we arrived at a time of year where nature's bounty was fully flourishing, wasn't it? There was loganberries and blueberries and I can't even remember, all sorts of different mushrooms, and in fact Jonas cooked us the most delicious dinner, didn't he, with mushrooms that he'd foraged himself and pork belly that we cooked on the fire. Yeah, it was good living, you know, it was simple living.
It has a big heritage, you know, it's 3rd or 4th, I can't remember exactly, generation fish farm. So it's been going for a long, long time.
The fish farm has been in existence for over a century. It was all dug by hand, and indeed the islands that you see in the lake, they're the stones that were piled up in the digging of the lake. They were made into mounds because that whole landscape is glacial. It's massive boulders and rocks and peat. He still farms carp, but mainly grass carp. That's his the monetary side of his business, but he also grows scaly carp, and that's his passion and his joy. So yeah, he's very well known throughout Scandinavia. The Anaboda fish farm is famous. It's legendary. I feel privileged to know Jonas, and even more privileged to be welcomed on his lake. He's such a lovely man, a gentle soul, and being in his company is calming, isn't it? He's obviously got a deep love for nature and for the area, and a deep understanding of the lake and how it is in all the seasons. Yeah, he's been there a long time, and I guess you inherit a deep knowledge and understanding and affinity being there that long. One of the best things about arriving there was walking around these paths, and they're not like your paths on your local park lake. They're well trodden but discreet, like the path that generations of rabbits will have carved into the landscape. Desire paths, they're called. So they follow the shortest possible route, and they're just made by generations of people walking around. And in this case, probably Jonas walking around, because not many other people walk around it as much as he does. So yeah, over the last 40 years or however many years he's been walking around it. I don't want to give away your age, Jonas. Cheers, mate. Cheers.
Haga is not a lake you can just turn up to. It's you know, I wouldn't say booking either. You know, you need to know Jonas, and he needs to know who you are. It is a privilege to get to go there. I mean, it's just like that idyllic water in the middle of pine forests. You can hear a pin drop. It's so quiet.
It's the quintessential Swedish experience, isn't it? Pine forests and silence. Just the wind in the trees. And that, in today's world, is a precious commodity. I strip back to the basics of, I mean, what do you really need in life? What do you really need? Nothing. No planes, no traffic, no distant sounds of humanity. Yeah, it's quite cathartic. Yeah, the landscape was so beautiful and so atmospheric. Particularly at that time of year, I think autumn's a good time to go because you've got the mist and the slightly cooler nights, and the colours, the autumnal colours starting to creep in, and the cobwebs, the bejeweled cobwebs in the morning. Yeah, it was very, very beautiful just to wake up to that environment and not feel any pressure. Didn't matter that I hadn't caught one. Just yeah, I could have done it for, I don't know, indefinitely.
Put the ring just here.
My initial approach was to try and catch them in the edge, and they were right close to the bank. I mean, under the rod tip, and it was so exciting, so nerve-wracking when there's fish swirling over the top of the rig. I just couldn't get them to eat. They weren't interested in eating. I spent the next couple of days chasing them round, dropping rigs on them. They weren't particularly spooked, they would just move slightly. It was frustrating, but enjoyable still.
I'm not really worried about them out there when I can see them down under my feet.
Do you know what? You've got to catch them how you want to catch them. And for me, they're like this, laying the trap in the edge when you can see how much they love the edge. It's the ultimate kind of up close and personal fishing. The only difference here is you can't really watch them because of the water clarity, but I'm sat here and I'm fishing in 18 inches of water, and you can see when they're over the rig.
It was a case of laying traps as discreetly as possible and trying to nick a bite. We could see them. They were constantly on show, waving tails, flicking pecks and fins. It wasn't they were mugging me off or doing me, or they just weren't feeding. The third venue was potentially going to be the hardest nut to crack. It was quite a large public venue, a naturally formed lake, quite famous among Swedish carp anglers, and certainly somewhere where there was some historic old carp. Not many again, but a stock of scaly old mirrors. This is what we were looking for sure.
It's all problem solving, isn't it? It's all problem 1, where's the carp? Problem 2, how do I get to them? Problem 3, how do I catch them?
For me, when time is limited, location is everything. I'd rather spend 23 hours looking and 1 hour fishing than fish blindly for 24 hours. I really would. I mean, for most of my fishing in the UK, I won't have rods in the water unless I know that I've got fish in front of me. And it felt like that was the most effective way to do it there as well. Even though it was a huge venue, just having random rods out wasn't going to give me any better chance of catching them.
They're either going to be here or they're going to be on the other side of that point. I've got a decision to make.
We had to roll the dice. We had one night. I'd already squandered my second night on the Park Lake, leaving only one night, potentially the hardest venue. And I had a decision to make. There were two really good looking areas. One of them was a big bay and the other was a much more open area of water, but extensive lily pads. Both of them looked like they were going to hold carp. I was so intent on seeing something before I fished, and eventually I saw a little bow wave. It wasn't much, just enough sign that there were fish in the bay. I went out in the boat, didn't use the motor because it was super shallow. The whole bay was 3 foot deep, so I tried to be as discreet as possible setting the traps, and it certainly paid off because, I don't know, I think I'd been fishing an hour. I don't think I'd even sat down and folded the bed out before I had the first bite. The fight itself was quite hairy. The bay was full of pads, and yeah, you're just half expecting it to fall off as it's ploughing through these lily pads and towing the boat around. When it went in the net, it was relief. It's always relief when you're filming because the pressure's on, isn't it? And I'm well aware that I've got Mike watching me through the long lens, filming my every move. Considering that the Park Lake I'd failed at the Park Lake, it was important to catch one from there, and it really felt like the trip had been made at that point, even though it wasn't a scaly mirror, ironically. Rowing back with that carp, or paddling back, even though it was hard work, it was really a massive relief, and all of us were proper buzzing. I remember we had a barbecue that night and really enjoyed the settings because it was beautiful. I mean, this was another kind of open access Park Lake, but much wilder. It felt a lot more Swedish, didn't it? An Indian summer, but like those Indian summers, you still have those misty mornings, and yeah, autumn was just beginning to kind of show, and the fish were in that transitional stage of behaviour, I think, halfway between summer and autumn.
But you've got to realize, you probably fish like once a month, maybe 2 times a month. So those fish are so used to ultra dead silence that when you take your first step, they're like, oh yeah, someone's here.
I think you have a very short window at the start of the trip, within that first couple of hours. And after that first couple of hours, it doesn't matter how quiet you are, doesn't matter how discreet you are, the word has got out around the lake. They all know, and they knew. They weren't unhappy, but they knew they were being fished for. Something changed on the final day in terms of the fish behaviour, and we were due to go, weren't we, that day? And indeed, I think we probably would have done, but I lost one in the morning. That was a low point of the trip for me, a real low point, because even worse than the one from the Park Lake, again, I'd been close. I got out in the boat over the top of it and ended up just hauling in a bit of petrified, mummified wood. And that was that. It seemed like the end of the world, but unimportant at the same time. It's funny because the fishing was secondary, but I was more aware that from a filming point of view that it was important to catch one. really important.
That shallow there that it was still on.
You would have seen it fractured.
I would have known straight away. You could see it was like wedged in that stick. It wouldn't have mattered.
And we did stay an extra night. And I'm glad we did, because something had changed in the behaviour of the fish. And where they hadn't been up for feeding for the previous 2 days, they were up for feeding. And indeed, the morning that we left, there was significant feeding activity. I wish we'd arrived that day. I knew it wasn't my tactics. That much I did know. I knew that it was simply a case of carp behaviour. You have to understand that. I think as much as we put a lot of sway into changing things or making them have it, and I don't think that's always the be-all and the end-all. Sometimes you just have to accept that it will come to you. And it did come to us eventually. It was almost totally out of the blue, the bite.
Oh well, I don't know how good that feels. Oh, it's been so hard.
It was all like a crescendo to that one point. The trip had got more and more Swedish as it had gone on, in terms of venues, in terms of the carp that we caught leading up to this point. And all Jonas's babies in Haga are special. Just don't lose it, don't lose it, don't lose it. And everybody's rooting for it to happen as well. You know, my success is their success, and my failure is their failure. There's a struggle, the reward is sweeter at the end, and that was definitely the case with that fish that ended the trip. It really was. It wasn't the biggest fish in the world, but it was so hard earned, and the build up to it meant that it was a real relief, you know.
Oh, they've lived it with me these last 3 days. The joy and the pain of this place. Oh my God. Final night, we've got one. Well, we came for scaly Swedish carp, and that's as good as they get, Jonas.
Yeah.
That's a Haga special.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so buzzing, boys, I really am. Why we came to Sweden, that's why we came to Haga, one of Jonas's babies. These carp, they are so special. So special. Look at it.
As much as catching a carp from Haga, when Jonas turned up in the morning with a carp each for us to stock, that was special. One of the things that Jonas and I share is an affinity for the breeding of carp. Jonas is the fish farmer in Scandinavia. His fish have been spread across the whole of Scandinavia and Northern Europe. You know, they're renowned. So for us to be able to stock one ourselves and to be involved in that, that felt quite special. It was really, really nice. Who can't get excited about small scaly carp? They're the future, aren't they?
As well.
So yeah, it would be really nice to go back one day maybe and maybe catch one of those ones.
Yeah, he's picking his favourites now. This is the dream. You see those tiny pea scales? Lovely. Thanks for showing us, Jonas.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
He had some very wise words for us about the things that are important about fishing, and that it's not just the fish, that there are 3 pillars or 3 important aspects to fishing. The fish are important, you need special carp, and Jonas is all about special carp, you know, but it's also important the environment that you fish in. You know, if the place that you fish in is special or beautiful, then your experience is heightened even further. And then thirdly is the people that you share that with. That's super important as well. If there are good people to share those highs and those lows with, then yeah, you've found angling heaven, haven't you? So if you've got all 3 of those things, then it doesn't get any better than that. And I really believe that we experienced that on that trip. If you can find somewhere like that in your everyday fishing, then you're super lucky. I think most of us maybe get to experience it once or twice in our lives. If you find somewhere like that, hold on to it for sure.